you talk about what is money. So with all those conversations that you've had, in your opinion, what is money? Is it a store of value? Is it a means of transacting, or is it a transfer of energy, like Laylah says?
You would think for a guy that runs a show called the What Is Money Show, I'd have some canned response for this when I go on other shows. But I actually have a document with over 50 answers to that question. And I've been actually writing on my Substack. I've been publishing basically a series of answers to that question. Like money is this, money is that, money is this. I never know which one to pick when someone asks me. But today, the one that comes to mind first is that money is quite simply a title to human time. So many of us probably own stocks or have owned stocks at some point. All that represents is an ownership claim on the capital of that company, ultimately. Like if you go all the way to the bottom of the stock certificate. And I think you can view money in a similar way in that instead of being a title to a specific company's capital, it's a title to the global capital stock, right? Money can be used to acquire anything the marketplace can bear. This is any product, any good, service, knowledge, whatever it may be. And all of those things are themselves products of human time. There's nothing that doesn't take human time to produce, right? Like even people want to talk about land, or even land takes hands to sell, takes time to sell. So in that sense, money is really the most important form of property humans have. And the more we economize our efforts, so the deeper we subdivide labor, this is called like the economic division of labor. Basically, the more intensity of exchange we have and the longer and more roundabout our production processes are, the more capital we can produce per unit of human time. So money ends up just being a claim on that economic surplus we create through cooperation. And it's frankly just the most important tool humans can wield. So that's a temporal aspect on money. Like, as you mentioned, Saylor has this whole energy aspect on money, which is also equally fascinating and complementary in a lot of ways. And that's just one example of, I never thought of money that way before talking to Saylor. And there's other, like I talked to, his name escapes me at the moment. He's basically, he's an evolutionary biologist, and he described money as liquid fitness, right? Like in a Darwinian sense. So there's all these unique answers that have come out of these conversations that just keep enriching my viewpoint and giving me new answers to write about on what is money.
And you said that right now you're particularly happy that Bitcoin exists. And you said that Bitcoin really encompasses what Western society is supposed to be, freedom, liberty, and all of that. So I'd like to get into that. Why particularly right now are you happy that Bitcoin exists? What is the problem for you right now that Bitcoin is solving?
Well, the problem in the world is excessive overgrowth of the state or government. When you get into the libertarian rabbit hole, you come to see government as the only business, let's say non-criminal business, that derives its revenue from involuntary exchange. Every other business, it's voluntary, right? You go to buy the car, you're negotiating a price, you reach a point and you execute the transaction, or you don't. Buyer and seller always have a say-so in every trade and every business in the world. That's not the case with government. We've been stuck in this, it's almost like a technological problem, I think, pre-Bitcoin, that we've been stuck with this situation of how do we preserve the integrity of the relationship between people and their stuff, owners and assets. That relationship itself, by the way, is property, right? How do we preserve that relationship in a way? So we have to outsource the physical security, right? You have a deed to your house. So if someone comes in and sleeps on your couch, you can call, the cops or whatever security force to remove that person. How do we preserve that relationship between people and their stuff in a way that the security provider that's securing that relationship does not use their security measures to abuse that relationship? And so that's what the state is. Like, we've outsourced all of our physical security to one monopoly on violence, effectively. And then we just trust them to charge us the right price. We don't negotiate. It's almost unnegotiable.
Yes.
For most people, 99.99% of people. There is a certain echelon of, if you're a billionaire or you're a multinational conglomerate, you can actually negotiate with nation states because you've developed so much negotiating leverage. But for the vast, vast majority of people, it's just not the case. So, and when you have that, it's almost a contradiction in terms in a way, because you basically have the state saying, hey, pay me to preserve this relationship between you and your stuff, whatever amount I tell you, or I'll take your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been like our best solution to the problem of property up until this point. And that is, by the way, the exclusive purpose of government. We get into these weird, like we think governments are supposed to do these other things that, preserve the greater good or whatever, but that's all nebulous and doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the fundamental economic purpose of government is property. So we've had this weird thing where we've always needed the monopoly on violence to honor the property rights. Well, along comes Bitcoin. I guess before that, where we are today, it's like that institution, that monopoly on violence, is now preying on the property rights of people heavily. And this is important to know too. Fiat currency inflation, when they're printing money, we could think about that one order deep and we think that's a good thing, but what's actually happening is just a transfer of wealth from the people that can't print money to the people that can print money. That's all it does. Printing money doesn't add any new productive factors to the economy. So it's purely a mechanism for wealth transfer, or said differently, property violation. Fiat currency inflation is a violation of property rights. So what are we doing in the post-COVID world? We're rampantly violating, when I say we, the state is rampantly violating the property rights of citizens worldwide. Every central bank worldwide is printing money to save the economy, to help people out. And people believe it because they don't understand money. So Bitcoin is important because finally citizens have an option to preserve their wealth in a medium or a form of property that lives independent of the monopoly on violence. Basically the miners are providing the security in the case of Bitcoin at a fair price, right? They can't coerce you to use Bitcoin. They can't, all of the transaction fees are done in a free market manner. There's not a coercive element within Bitcoin. So that gives citizens that may be being preyed upon or oppressed by the state in terms of having their property violated an alternative, an opt-out. And so just by giving people that option to exit, I think in the long run, it actually forces government to behave more honestly, to actually treat people like customers rather than subjects. And so that's what I'm trying to educate people about. Like, property is the sole purpose of government. Property is also the basis of civilization. Like Ayn Rand said, if a man cannot control the fruit of his own labor, he has no other rights. All human rights, everything that we think is good, civil liberties, all these things, it's built on property. And so finally we have a property that's independent of the state, cannot be inflated, cannot be manipulated, cannot be corrupted. And that simple opt-out option forces governments to deal with this more honestly.
But we live in a society whereby this is a very libertarian mindset, and it's one that I share. And the idea that we should have a small government, if any at all, is a very niche idea, particularly in 2022. So if property is just the sole purpose, how did we get to a point where the government really is in every aspect of our lives, even to the point where we will protect you, take this medicine because we know that this is better for you? How did we get to a point where the government is in every aspect of our lives?
Central banking and fiat currency, right? A government, effectively, by having a central bank implemented inside of a country, the government effectively has a mechanism of unlimited revenue, and you could also say a mechanism of limited liability. So a government can go and spend and borrow as much as it likes, misallocate as much capital as it wants, run huge deficits, losses, right? And an economic deficit or loss, that means you're spending resources that are not satisfying humans. You're wasting resources. That's what it means. But when a government can just print new money to pay for this paper over this bad decision making, this capital misallocation, and then externalize the cost of all that money printing onto the productive society, they're just confiscating wealth from productive people that are running profitable businesses, creating valuable goods and services in the world, and then channeling it into the government misallocation of capital. So it's a business that can never lose, right? It's heads I win, tails you lose from the state's perspective. They can make bad decisions, screw it all up. Well, just print more money. I'll confiscate wealth from everyone that was successful in the marketplace and then reallocate capital further. So fiat currency has led to the overgrowth of the state. It's led to an overemphasis, I argue, on politics. People have such a deep connection to their personal political identity and their collective political identity. They really think that's the most important thing in the world, right? Are you liberal? Are you conservative? Are you red? Are you blue?
I think these days I find that very important, knowing what somebody is, just in case.
I think it's all premised on the violability of property. Because in this hypothetical world where you can't hurt me and you can't steal my stuff, this would be just a hypothetical world that's not even possible. It's an ideal. But in a world where you can't hurt me, you can't steal my stuff, why would we ever argue about political opinions? Why would we ever try to put ourselves under one roof? If we don't get along, we don't see eye to eye about whatever issue it is, whatever social issue it is, we would just go our separate ways.